do something a little bit different today. So the other day I stumbled across this list on The Guardian of the 100 greatest novels of all time. Supposedly. It's from 2003, so it's pretty much ancient in terms of internet content, but it's still, obviously, it's about classics, so it's still relevant. Obviously, this list is going to be biased because literature is just very subjective, so there's no such thing as a fully accurate or unbiased list of the best novels, or the best literature works, or whatever. And I'm sure there will be plenty of books that I would have added to this list, or you would have added to this list, and probably some books on here that were kind of like, why are those there? But it was published on The Guardian, and as far as I can tell, it's quite a popular article, and it's one of the only lists of best novels or best literary works that I can find. So I thought today it would be kind of fun just to go through these and figure out exactly how much of the greatest literature in terms of novels that I've read. If you guys don't know, I did study literature. I studied English literature for my undergrad in the US, and then I went to the UK and studied British literature, specifically in the UK, and my specialty was Romantic and Victorian. And I've left a link in the description box below for you guys if you want to click on it and follow through and kind of tally up how many you have, and then we can compare. The first one on the list is Don Quixote, which I have read. I will be honest, I'm not sure if I've read every bit of Don Quixote, but I've definitely read significant excerpts, so I will count that one. Second, Pilgrim's Progress. Yes, I have read that one. Robinson Crusoe, yes, as well as Gulliver's Travels, which is the fourth one, so 2 tallies for me. Tom Jones by Henry Fielding. I have not read this one. Clarissa, I also have not read. Okay, we were doing really well, but now it's just kind of going downhill. Tristram Shandy, I've read about, but I've not read. Dangerous Liaisons, I have not read as well. That's French literature. I probably should kind of buff up my French literature since I'm living in France now. Emma, of course, I've read. I love Jane Austen. Frankenstein, once again, of course I've read it. Nightmare Abbey by Thomas Love Peacock. I have not read that, and to be honest, I don't even know the premise of that. The Black Sheep, same thing, I haven't read it, and I'm not sure about the premise. The Charterhouse of Parma, no, I have not read that one. The Count of Monte Cristo, I have not. I have read The Three Musketeers, but it doesn't count in this list. I'm also a bit bummed that this is just novels, so there's not gonna be any Shakespeare plays on here, which is really a shame because I've read a lot of Shakespeare and I would love to get the points from that. Number 15 is Sybil, which I have not read. David Copperfield I've read about, but I've not read it. It's one of the Dickens novels that I have not read. Wuthering Heights I have. To be completely honest, I didn't like it very well, but I had to read it kind of in a crammed week-long, not even week-long session, but I had a week to read that and like 3 other books, so I did not get to really enjoy it, and I'm kind of sad about that. At some point I want to go back and reread it. Jane Eyre is another one I've read, but it was crammed for class, so didn't get the full appreciation of that one. But I've read it, so it counts. That's the point. Vanity Fair I have not read. The Scarlet Letter I also have not read, although I have read excerpts, but not enough that I'm going to count it as a point because very short excerpts. Moby Dick is another one I know obviously so much about, but fortunately I haven't read. I have to. It's just, I feel like if I'm gonna be a fan of Starbucks, I have to be a fan of Moby Dick. Madame Bovary is another one that I know about very well. A lot of these are gonna be like that. I've heard of them, I may have even read about them or even read spoilers and things like that because that just happens, but I've not actually read the book. The Woman in White, I don't even know actually. It's by Wilkie Collins. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, I have read. Number 25 is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, and of course I've read this one. I'm pretty sure every young American girl who likes to read has read Little Women. The Way We Live Now by Anthony Trollope, I have not read, although I have heard of it, which is not surprising because it looks like it's a Victorian book. Anna Karenina, I have also not read. That's one that I really want to, but I mean, it's Tolstoy, so it's a big commitment if you want to read Tolstoy. Daniel Deronda by George Eliot. I do not even know this one. That's actually really sad because obviously I know George Eliot, but I have not read this novel. The Brothers Karamazov, I hope I'm saying that right, by Dostoevsky. I've not actually read anything by Dostoevsky except his literary theory writings, his nonfiction, which I had to read for my literary theory class, and I used those to write papers, and I used those themes and bases for essays, but I've not actually read his literary works. The Portrait of a Lady by Henry James I have read. I actually took a class on Henry James and Oscar Wilde, both of them together, and I read a ton of their works, and I liked Henry James, but I had to read him alongside Oscar Wilde, who became one of my absolute favorite authors. So unfortunately for Henry James, I wasn't quite as big of a fan. Huckleberry Finn, I have not read. I've read Tom Sawyer, and I almost gave myself a point for this one when I saw it, but it's one of the twains that I haven't read, actually. The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, I have read. Three Men in a Boat, I have not. The Picture of Dorian Gray, like I just mentioned, I took a class on Henry James and Oscar Wilde, and this was one of the things I read for class, and it was basically my first introduction to Oscar Wilde, I think, ever. And I loved it. I absolutely fell in love with The Picture of Dorian Gray, as well as one of his plays, Importance of Being Earnest, which became probably my favorite of his works. The Diary of a Nobody, I have not read. Jude the Obscure, I have not read. The Riddle of the Sands, I have not read. In fact, I don't think I've heard of either of those, any of those three. The Call of the Wild by Jack London, I know about, but I have not read it. Nostromo by Joseph Conrad, I have not. I've read Heart of Darkness, but not Nostromo. The Wind in the Willows, I have not. In Search of Lost Time, I have not. It's getting bad again, guys. The Rainbow by D.H. Lawrence, I have not. The Good Soldier, not. The 39 Steps, I have not. Ulysses, I have read about, but once again, I've not read enough of it to count it as a read, which is really a shame because we're going downhill. Oh, here's a good one. 46 is Mrs. Dalloway, which I have read. I've also watched a film adaptation. I've written essays about it. I know a lot actually about Mrs. Dalloway. I spent quite a bit of time with it. A Passage to India, I have not read. The Great Gatsby, I have. It took me a while to read that one, actually. A lot of people read it in high school, but I didn't for whatever reason. And so by the time I got to college, it was kind of in a lot of the curriculum when people would compare it to things, or when I took my literary theory class, Gatsby was the one that they compared every literary theory to, basically, because it was one that was very applicable to a lot of the theories, but also they assumed every single person in the class had read it, but I hadn't. So eventually I just had to buckle down and make myself read it in my spare time. The Trial by Franz Kafka, I have not. I've not read any novels by Kafka. Men Without Women, I have not as well. I've not read any of Hemingway's novels. Journey to the End of the Night, I have not. As I Lay Dying, I have not. Brave New World, I had sitting on my bookshelf for a long time, but I never read it, sadly. Scoop, I have not. USA, I have not. The Big Sleep, I have not. We're going downhill. The Pursuit of Love, The Plague, 1984, I've not, but like pretty much everybody, I think I know what it's about. I've read about it, but I've not actually sat down and made the commitment to read the entire book. Malone Dies, I have not. Catcher in the Rye is another one that I think a lot of people read in high school, maybe, but I never did, so I haven't read it, sadly. Wise Blood, I have not. Charlotte's Web, I have. There's one, finally another point. Lord of the Rings, there. Can I count that one for like 3, 4, 5 points? Considering how much I have read it. Lucky Jim, I have not. I've not even heard of that one, but it looks like it's from the 50s, which is not really my era. Lord of the Flies, again, one of those that I feel like everyone's read, but I have not, unfortunately. The Quiet American, I have not. I've not even heard of it. Again, it's set in the 1950s, so it's a bit more modern than a lot of the literature I read in my classes. On the Road, I have read. That's one from the 60s, I believe, and I have read it. Lolita, I have also read. Not the greatest read of my life, but okay. The Tin Drum, I have not read. Things Fall Apart, no. The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, I have also not read. To Kill a Mockingbird is another one that I am really ashamed to admit I have not read. I've read about it, I know what it's about. I feel like I've read it, I know it, but I've never actually sat down and read it. Catch-22, once again, one that everyone knows about, but I have not actually read it. Herzog, I have not read. 100 Years of Solitude, I have read pieces of because I took a class where I studied some Gabriel Garcia Marquez stuff. Mrs. Palfrey at the Claremont, no. Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, no. Song of Solomon, I have read. I don't remember it very well because it's been a long time, but I took a class where I read quite a bit of Toni Morrison. The Bottle Factory Outing, I have not read. I don't even know that one, actually. The Executioner's Song, I have not read. If on a Winter's Night, A Traveler, I don't even know. A Bend in the River, I've not read. Waiting for the Barbarians, another one I have not read. Housekeeping, I've not read. Lanark, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that, but I have not read it. The New York Trilogy by Paul Astor, I have not read. Once again, it's more modern. I think that's kind of where we're going with a lot of these. They're a little bit more modern. Once you get into the 1900s, it was kind of out of my specialty zone, so I didn't read quite as much of that. The BFG, I have heard of, but not read. The Periodic Table, not heard of or read. I mean, I've heard of the Periodic Table, but not the novel. I feel like that was probably not a distinction I needed to make, but I made it anyway. There you go. Money, I have not read. An Artist of the Floating World, I have not read. Oscar and Lucinda, Same. The Book of Laughter and Forgetting, same. Haroun and the Sea of Stories, I have not read. LA Confidential, I've not read. Wise Children, no. Atonement, finally a yes at the end of this list. I have read Atonement. Northern Lights, I have read by Philip Pullman. American Pastoral, I have not. And finally, number 100, we finally got there, guys. Austerlitz, I have not read. So we ended on a really bad note there. Okay, so I may have lost a little bit of count somewhere in there. I was really trying hard to keep tabs on everything, but I'm just gonna go through the list one more time just to kind of count them up and make sure I did that right. Okay, so upon going back through them, I'm pretty sure I counted 22, but I have 23 tabs. So something went wrong there, but I've read about 22 or 23 of these 100. So yeah, I mean, it's not bad, but I was really hoping I would have more. Can we add some plays to this list so I can add all my Shakespeare and make my score a little bit higher? Like I said, this is obviously going to be a biased list, so there's plenty of other things that I've read, that you've read, that are not on this list, that are potentially some of the greatest novels as well. Let me know in the comments what scores you guys got, and also if you could add any 1 or 2 or 3 books to this list, which ones would they be and why? Also, this is a completely different style video from basically everything that I've done before. So if you guys enjoyed this, definitely let me know by giving a like to this video, and you can tweet me or you can leave a comment down below and just let me know if you liked this and if you want to see more like this in the future. So we've learned today that apparently I am not as well read in the classics according to The Guardian as I probably should be, and also I've been reminded of how many books I have on my to-read list that I really, really need to read. There are just way too many books out there. Old books, new books, everything in between. There's just not enough time. I'm gonna go read now. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you soon in another video.